Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to this afternoon's webinar all about attachments of earnings in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Duncan, I'm your host and presenter, and we are joined today by my colleagues Calvin and Phil, who are standing by in the background ready to answer any questions. Let's take a look at what we're going to cover in the webinar. So we're going to begin with an introduction to the different attachment types that can be set up in Sage 50 Payroll and what attachments they relate to in real life. We're then going to discuss working out how much to deduct for an attachment order, whether that's a specific amount you've been told or a calculated amount from tables. We're then going to demonstrate how to set up and assign attachments to employee records. And then we'll finish with processing attachments, going through some of the calculations for the deduction and showing you where to find that information on some of the reports and pay slips. Finally, we have a quick quiz at the end, a few questions. It's entirely optional, so that's just to test your knowledge and for a bit of audience participation. And as I say, we'll try and stick around at the end to answer any of those final questions as well. So let's get things started by looking at the attachment types. Now, within Sage 50 Payroll, there are 17 different attachment types, and they all relate to different debt deduction orders that you might receive from a court or other issuing authority. And what I've tried to do is group some of these together because they all do sort of relate to 5 broad categories. So you'll see these different references and descriptions in the settings later on in the demo. But to look through the main types of attachments, you have your standard debt deductions, which are classed either as priority deductions or non-priority, and it will make clear on the paperwork you receive whether it is priority or not. For these ones, you would choose attachment type 1, 4, or 12, which is 1971 priority, 1971 non-priority, or the fines enforcement attachment, which is one way you're given tables to calculate it. But more on calculating the amount in just a moment. The next category is child maintenance attachments. So if you receive one of these, you would either need to set up attachment type 2 for child support, or more commonly these days, you would choose attachment type 14, child support 2012. And the main difference here is that child support orders from 2012 use a protected earnings proportion of 60% rather than a specified protected earnings amount. So you would find with child maintenance these days, most of them you would set up using attachment type 14. The next ones relate to either community charge or council tax debt. So the community charge was the official name of the poll tax back in the 90s. Not many of those around these days, but they are types 5 and 6 in your settings. You've then got council tax, which relates to all council tax debts, with the exception of Welsh council tax, with effect from the 1st of April, which has its own category, which is reference 17. We've got some special types for attachments in Scotland. So Scottish earnings arrestments would fall either under reference 8, 9, or 10. And then one of the more recent attachment types is for benefit debt deductions, it's known as a direct earnings attachment, and it's either made at a normal rate or a higher rate, depending on the reason why that is being deducted from your employee. So that's attachment type 15 and 16. So useful information to have for reference, and obviously you'll find that in the handout if you choose to download it. But let's now move on and take a look at how you would work out how much you need to deduct when you receive an attachment order. So there's 2 ways that the amount to be deducted will be communicated to you. It will either be an order that has a normal deduction rate, or NDR for short, which tells you specifically the amount that needs to be deducted each period. And often these types of attachments will also have a protected earnings amount, which is an amount that the deduction must not reduce employees' net pay below. So if an attachment with protected earnings would take the net pay below this protected earnings amount, it would not deduct part of that attachment for that period. And in some cases, it will carry that forward to a future period. You are also allowed to charge an admin fee of £1 per attachment towards your costs. It's entirely optional. That fee comes off your employee, and we will show how to set that up when we go through the demo. And the image on the slide there is a CAPS attachment. Just found that with a quick Google search, and that's a type of attachment where it would tell you how much to deduct each period, and often it will also tell you what the protected earnings are. Now, the other way to calculate a deduction is using attachment of earnings tables. So with this, it usually bands the earnings either for weekly or monthly paid employees, and it will give you usually a percentage of those earnings to deduct for the attachment. And on the screenshot here, you can see an example of council tax attachment tables. So if we took monthly, which is there on the right-hand side, and an employee's attachable pay was say £1,000, you would need to take a deduction of 12% of that amount towards the council tax debt. Now, the good thing about the ones with tables is that the tables are all built into your program. So as long as you're selecting the correct attachment type and the effective from date of that attachment, it'll refer to these tables in the legislation, and it will work out the amount to deduct for you. And as you can see from the tip on screen, you will be able to find those tables in the legislation settings. In fact, let's have a quick look at that now. If I just bring the slides down. So within Sage Payroll, if you go to Company here on the left-hand side, and then go to Legislation, you can then click the AEO Rates tab, and then you'll see those 17 attachment types. They don't all have tables, but council tax, for example, does. You've got the various effective from dates, and then we can see the banded earnings for weekly and the deductions to take and the equivalent for monthly. And in the case of council tax, as it says here in the note at the bottom, if the attachable earnings, that's earnings after tax and national insurance, exceed the highest value in this table, so 2020 for monthly paid, you should take 50% of the excess and then 17% of the earnings up to 2020. So that again will be calculated automatically, and we'll see an example of that later on in the demo. So council tax has tables, fines enforcement. It's also a priority attachment that also has tables to work out the deduction. So really handy to know where to find that, because it can often help you establish what type of attachment is if you've been given tables and you're not quite sure which category to choose. So what counts as earnings when it comes to these attachments? Well, basically it is most payments that are subject to tax and national insurance that should be included in attachable pay. So that includes wages and salary, including bonuses and overtime, holiday pay and pay advances, pension payments, if an employee is being paid a pension through an occupational scheme, and statutory sick pay, which is actually the only statutory payment which counts as attachable pay. So what's not included is statutory redundancy pay. So you wouldn't deduct anything from that, and the statutory parental payments, maternity, paternity, and adoption pay being the main examples. And you can read more about this if you follow the link to our knowledge base article on the slide. So that's just a bit of background on the different attachment types, how you would work out the deduction, and what counts as earnings. Let's get into a demo, and we'll take a look at setting up and assigning attachments to your employees. So when you receive an attachment order, you will need to decide whether or not you're going to deduct that £1 admin fee. And if you are, you will need to set this up in the pay element setting against that type of attachment. So there'll be a drop down where you can set admin fee to yes or no. And then if you've set it to yes, it will deduct a further £1 from your employee. Now you also have the option of adding replacement descriptions. So the standard descriptions are shown in that first column. A replacement description can be used, and that will replace this text on the pay slips and also on the screen when you're entering the payments. The other thing to do is to make sure that the relevant payments are set up to be subject to attachments. So there are some pay element settings for community charge, council tax, and all other attachments. So you'll need to make sure they are ticked for all of the payments that count towards attachable pay. So quick look at these settings. If I bring the slides down again, we're going to stick on the company tasks for now, but this time we're going to go into pay elements. If I click on the attachment of earnings orders tab, you'll see we've got the 17 attachment types, and we have our replacement description and admin fee column. So just for this example, I've decided that if I get any council tax attachments, I do want to deduct that £1 as an admin fee. So I have set admin fee to yes. I'm happy with most of the descriptions, but I am going to replace the description for priority and non-priority. Since 1971 refers to an Act of Parliament to do with attachment of earnings orders. Might not mean anything to our employee though. So I might change the name of this first one to priority AEO, and maybe I'll change the name of the other one to non-priority AEO. So a little bit more kind of descriptive of what those attachment types are. So I'm happy with those settings. I'm going to click OK. And we're going to see those replacement descriptions now when we come to assign those attachment types. But the other thing just to run through are the pay element settings for the payments themselves. So I'm actually going to jump back into pay elements. Didn't really need to close that. And you'll see I've got payments for overtime, commission and expenses. So overtime and commission, subject to tax and national insurance, and should be included in attachable pay. So if I edit the payments, you'll see that I've already ticked the 3 boxes here on the right hand side. Exactly the same for commission. Those boxes have been ticked. But for expenses, when I'm reimbursing expenses to my employees, I don't want to include that in the attachable pay. So for that reason, these boxes for my expenses payment have been cleared. So if you're troubleshooting why an attachment perhaps isn't deducting, it is worth checking the pay element settings to make sure you have ticked to include them in the attachment calculations. Right, so that's the pay element settings. We'll take a look at assigning the attachments to the employees. So I'm actually going to assign attachments to 3 of my employees for the demo today, the first 3 in my list. And you would do this via the employee record. You could also do it actually in the middle of enter payments, but I will show you that a little bit later on. So if I go into the employee record, it's going to bring up the record for my first employee. You go to employment and then down here to the pay elements. And then you'll find there's a section for attachment of earnings orders. And then you would complete the details on this screen. So for employee 1, let's say we've received a council tax attachment. So that was number 7. It's English council tax in this case, it's not Welsh. And because I've selected that, and it has a table associated, you can see that the box at the bottom to use tables for these type of attachments has been ticked automatically. So make sure that is ticked if you're assigning one of these, and then you'll see that we can't enter anything for normal deduction rate. That's going to be calculated for us. We can't enter protected earnings. It's just going to take a percentage based on the band, but we do need to enter the total attachment. So in this case, the debt is £5,500. The order was issued on the 1st of this month. And if I've been given a reference that I want to note for my records, I could enter that reference here. So that is set up for my first employee. This is going to deduct a council tax attachment until the total attachment is reached, or until I enter an order end date if I've been instructed to stop the attachment before it was fully paid. That could happen, I guess, if the employee has contacted the creditor directly and they've made an arrangement to pay that in full. So they might then get back in contact with you and say, cancel that attachment. So that's what the end date could be used for. So that is our first employee. Let's do something similar for the next one. This employee, we're going to set up a child support attachment. So this one has a normal deduction rate, and I've also been told there's a protected earnings proportion of 60%. So we know it's one of the more recent child support attachments. So if I go into the attachments tab again, I need to pick number 14, child support 2012. And from here, I can enter the normal deduction rate I've been given, £240 a month. I can't enter protected earnings, and that's because the protected earnings is 60% of the attachable pay. And with child support, it does tend to be an ongoing arrangement until further notice. So you don't often get a total attachment amount. So in this case, we're going to leave that at 0. I'll pop the order issued date in. So all of these are coming in on the 1st of September. And for child support, because you'll need to create a deduction schedule to send to the child maintenance people, you will need to put the 12-digit order reference in. So I'm going to pop in a 12-digit reference just there. So that one's all set up. I'm going to go ahead and save the attachment for that second employee. We're going to do one more. Well, that's just bombed out. So let's just jump back into the program for you there. Right, where were we? Just checking the attachments are still on this one. Yeah, child support one's still there. And then we're going to add a non-priority attachment for this third one. So we were given a normal deduction rate. We were given protected earnings in this case, but we were not told that it was priority. So I'm going to choose non-priority, which is reference 4. We'll pop the normal deduction rate in and some protected earnings as stated on the order. And then the total debt was, in this case, £3,000. So this one as well doesn't require tables. We've got a normal deduction rate specified. And I can just go ahead and save the details. So that's everything set up and assigned. So we set up our admin fees. We just did it for council tax. You can add replacement descriptions if you wish to. We checked our pay element settings to make sure those that should be attachable were. And then when we've assigned it here, we chose the attachment type. We've entered the details, so normal deduction rate where applicable, protected earnings, and total attachment. And for those that do use tables, we'll tick the box at the bottom to use tables for these types of attachment. So all that remains now is to check that everything's being deducted in our next pay run. So we'll run through a quick demo. I'll explain some of the calculations as well for the one that uses a table. So let me just bring the slides down again. I'm going to go on to my payroll tasks now. And I've already set my process date to my next pay date. If I open the enter payment screen, that will show me the payments for the first employee. So we've just got some salary entered at this point in time. And to check the attachment amount, I'm simply going to click the attachments tab. So the attach value has been calculated for me. The £1 admin fee is being deducted. It's displaying the attachable earnings. So this is the gross pay minus tax and national insurance. That's what's attachable. And then this column shows the amount that is actually being deducted. So where did this £432.08 come from? Well, it all depends on the attachable earnings. So quick look at the tables for council tax. So in the legislation, I can find them from here. So it's monthly with attachable earnings in excess of 2020. So 17% on the earnings up to 2020, 50% on the remainder is how that calculation is being done. So if I go back into enter payments for this employee, I'll just bring up a handy calculator. So we'll work out the excess first, 2097.36 minus 2020. So that's the amount where we take 50%, which which is £88.68. And then for the 2020, that was 17%. We will add on that 88.68, and that gives us the £432.08. So that's how it's worked it out. That is the amount deducted, and it's going to track the amounts deducted until the full debt has been repaid. On to my next employee. Employee 2 had the child support attachment, so £240 normal deduction rate. This can be overtyped in the enter payment screen if required, but it tends to stay the same. No admin fee for this attachment type because I didn't assign one. Attachable pay, just under £1,900. So the protected earnings is 60% of this amount. And as such, the full amount can be deducted in this case. So £240 is being deducted. Now, let's just change the scenario slightly. Let's say this employee is currently unwell and they're going to take a full month on statutory sick pay. So I'm going to remove their salary and I'm going to enter some absence for September. So their SSP payable is £393. If we check what effect that has on the attachment, so the attachable pay is the amount after that tax refund is taken into consideration. So this is the attachable earnings. 60% of that is the protected earnings. So that's the amount that the pay cannot go below, and that is actually what the net pay is. And as such, it's not taking the full £240, it's only taking £209.86, and it is carrying forward an amount of £30.14. So it will try to take that amount next time the employee is paid, assuming they have sufficient protected earnings, or attachable pay, I should say. So this is where protected earnings can come in if there's been a reduction in salary. In this case, it's due to the statutory sick pay this month. Last one then. This is the employee with our non-priority attachment, so £150. Protected earnings was £1,000 in our example, so it's able to take the full amount. But again, let's say they were on half pay this month for some reason. I put them down to half pay and check the attachment now. It can't take the full amount because it would take them down below the attachable earnings, below the protected earnings. So this is the amount that's being taken, but with this being non-priority, it is not carrying forward the amount unpaid. So next time, it's still going to take the usual attached value. It's not going to add on what was missed off this time. If it was a priority order, it would carry forward, and child maintenance is classed as a priority order. So we've got all them payments saved. We'll take a very quick look at the reports, the pre-update reports. So I've just looked at a standard pay slip for these particular employees. And we'll be looking, I need to take that message off, that's a blast from the past. We've got the council tax attachment and the admin fee for this first employee. Child support attachment for this next employee, although that isn't the full amount. It's not the normal deduction rate because they're only on sick pay. And then we've got this non-priority attachment. See that it's used the replacement description as a deduction for this third employee. So that's what it looks like on those reports. Another report you might want to run at this point within the analysis folder is the attachments current report, as that gives some more granular detail on the attachments themselves. Okay, that's not a great example. Probably the attachment of earnings report within summary is the one I was thinking of. It was indeed. So council tax attachment gives details of the balances, etc., the amount deducted, and then we've got similar information for the other employees with these attachments. So the one you want here, it's in summary, attachment of earnings. I'll take that one off my favorites. So it's something you could run for your own records. So just to finish off this demo, I'm going to update records for this period. There we go. So that's now a historical entry. If I set my date to my next pay date, so within the next period, you'll see that the attachment continues to be deducted for our first employee. Let's say that this employee is now back to work, so they're getting their full month's wage rather than just SSP. And because there was an amount carried forward, the amount deducted this month is clawing back that £30.14. So normal deduction rate amount this time is higher because we did have an amount carried forward. And for this third one, again, we'll put them back up to full pay. And then on the attachments, it's just taken the standard £150. With it being non-priority, it hasn't carried forward the missing amount from last month. There was one other thing I wanted to show you, a bit of a tip. So if you do have employees with multiple attachments, there is a particular order that you would need to deduct them in. So it'd be priority attachments first in the date order that they were received, followed by non-priority orders. So let's just say for this employee, we've just had a council tax attachment through. So that's a priority one, and it would take priority over the existing order. So we can add it as an attachment. So this takes us into the pay elements. I can select council tax, and it will tick the box because this one uses tables. We can put the total attachment amount in and the date issued. But at the moment, it's listed that as the second priority, when in fact it should be the first. So if you ever need to switch the priorities for someone with multiple orders, this is how you do it. So for the existing order, set the priority to 0. What you can then do is you can set this one to first priority, and then we'll set this one to second. So the top tip there is change the priority to 0 first for the one that you're moving, then set this one, and then set that one. And if I save it, you'll see that it's changed the order. So council tax takes priority, it has the higher attachable pay. And then the non-priority order comes next. So that, I think, is about it for the demo, but let's just recap processing the attachments. So it's the attachments tab in the enter payment screen that gives you all the detail. The attached value is either the normal deduction rate that you set up, or it's been calculated by tables. Admin fee will be £1 if you've set it up. Attachable earnings is pay remaining after PAYE, national insurance, and any higher priority AEOs. Amount deducted is what's being taken. And then, if applicable, you'll have amounts carried forward due to protected earnings. And if there's a specific protected earnings amount, you can sometimes have protected earnings carried forward. But there wasn't in our case because it was a 60% protected earnings proportion. So that's just where to find all the information. And that leads us nicely on to a little bit of fun. We have a quiz to test your knowledge on what you've seen so far. So this part is entirely optional. We do it by running a poll where you can select an answer on screen, and then we share the overall results, so what percentages voted for each answer on the poll, and I will then let you know whether you were right or wrong. So if you want to join in, the first question is coming up just now. So this question is, where in Sage 50 Payroll can you find the attachment of earnings tables? And your choices here are A, from company, legislation, AEO rates. The second option, is it from company, pay elements, and then attachments? Or can you find the attachment tables within the employee record, pay elements, attachment of earnings? So we showed you this a few times in the demo, so hopefully a nice easy starter for you. Where can you find the attachment tables? Is it in company legislation, AEO rates, company pay elements, attachments, or is it in the employee record, pay elements, attachment of earnings? So we leave this up for about a minute, giving you a chance to cast a vote if you wish to. And as we've had about 70% of the votes in, I will close that down and we'll see if you got it right. So results incoming, and I'm happy to see that 91% have got that one right. You can indeed find the attachment tables within company legislation and AEO rates. Then you open the drop down for the type of attachment you're interested in, and it will display that information. Bonus points if you also knew that you can run a report with that same information on it. So well done to those who got that one right. On to our next question. So for this one, which attachment type would you assign to an employee in Sage 50 Payroll if you have a child maintenance attachment with a 60% protected earnings proportion? So would you choose the attachment type of child support? That's reference 2 in the pay element settings. Would you choose deduction of earnings order, which I think is reference 3? Or would you choose child support 2012, which is reference 14? So which attachment type would you assign for a child maintenance attachment with a 60% protected earnings proportion? So we'll give you about another 10 seconds on this one. Results looking good so far. And with just over 70% of the votes, we will close that down and share the results. So great work here. 92% of you got that right. It is child support 2012 that you would choose in that scenario. Child support would be used for older child support attachments where you're given a specific protected earnings amount. And a deduction of earnings order is there, but you wouldn't really use it for this attachment type. So for the one where protected earnings is 60%, number 14, child support 2012 is what you would choose. So one more question for you. This one is true or false. And it's now on screen. So if a non-priority attachment of earnings order is not deducted due to protected earnings, the amount not deducted will be carried forward to the next period. So is that statement true or is that statement false? So non-priority attachment of earnings order not deducted due to protected earnings. The amount not deducted is carried forward to the next period. Is that true or is that false? So I've got some answers coming in on this one. So just over 70% have voted. And that's a minute, so we will close the poll down and share the results. So tried to trick you a little bit on this one, bit of a double negative and stuff, but the correct answer here is false. So if a non-priority attachment is not deducted due to protected earnings, the amount will not be carried forward to the next period. It will simply try to take the usual normal deduction rate next time round. So 74% of you got that right by saying that that statement was false. So well done to anyone that got 3 out of 3. And that pretty much brings you to the end of the presentation. So we have got some time left, so we will stick around to continue answering any of your questions. So keep them coming in the chat if you want to ask any of them. I want to very quickly run through some of the further support that's available to you. So first thing to mention is our online help centre, which you can access in a few different ways. You can either go to sage.co.uk/help from any browser. From there, follow the links to Sage 50 Payroll, and then you can search our knowledge base, read our support guides. There's a link to webinars towards the top of the Payroll Help Centre. So if you want to check out what else we've got coming up and you want to sign up to those, you can find the details from there. There are also various videos and all of the contact details should you need to get in touch with our support team. So you can access it through a browser. You can also press the help button in your program to bring up our Get Help Center, and you can press F1 in your program as well as another way to get in to that same area. Also to make you aware that we have Sage University available. It's an excellent resource for brushing up on your payroll skills. You can create your free profile at sageu.com, and all of our Sage 50 payroll learning is available free of charge. You can get e-learning courses that you can complete at your own time. You can do online certification to test your knowledge on what you've learned. And we have a number of bite-sized learning courses as well for you to dip in and out of if there's a particular topic that you want to brush up on. So that's Sage University, all available at sageu.com. So we are nearly at the end, but as promised, we are going to stick around to make sure that we've answered the questions in the Q&A. If you're wondering whether you can download the questions and answers, you can't download them directly. So what you will need to do is to copy and paste any of the questions and answers you want to keep into another document, such as a Word document. If you'd like our handouts, they can still be downloaded from the handouts icon. We will send you a follow-up email, which will contain links to register for future webinars, as well as a link to the recording of today's session. So look out for that arriving later today. And as you exit the survey, when you click that exit button, or when we end it, you'll be presented with a feedback survey. So I'd really appreciate any of your thoughts on today's session, as it'll help us to improve these sessions in the future going forward. So I'm just going to go on to mute for a few minutes just to make sure we've covered off the questions, and we'll be back to say goodbye when we're ready to end the session. So I'll speak to you soon. So hello again, everyone. We are nearly at the end of our allotted time. I can see a few last-minute questions have just come through, so we'll just get some answers out to those questions before we wrap up. I just want to thank you all for your time this afternoon, and thanks for joining us at the webinar. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment to complete the short exit survey that appears as you exit the webinar, we would really appreciate any feedback that you have. And please look out for a follow-up email that'll be arriving later today. It includes links to register for future webinars. You can do that anytime from sage.co.uk/webinars, and also a link to watch the recording of today's session. So we'll stay online just a moment longer to get those final answers out. But for those of you leaving now, thanks so much for joining us. I hope you found the session useful, and we do very much look forward to seeing you on some of our other webinars in the future. So I'm going to say goodbye for now, and we will shortly close the webinar.